Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to hear a couple of woohoos. A little nervous about the second to last talk, so very nice to see the energy in the room. And I see that we've dwindled down a little bit. I know some people already had to head back home, so thank you to everybody who's here. That means a lot. And very excited to have this kind of smaller audience. Really hoping this is more of a conversation. So do feel free to ask questions during. That won't bother me at all. And of course, if you want to save them to the end, that's completely fine. But just looking forward to hearing all of your questions. They've been very good so far. So throw some hard ones at me. Those are always fun. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Shannon. I'm a user experience researcher at Google Workspace. And if you had asked me yesterday to explain what I work on, I would have described what I work on as a bunch of different products that help people with productivity. Bianca's talk yesterday, maybe this looks familiar. So she asked us to write down on this card what business we work in. And I technically work and I lead the calendar and task products. So I wrote down productivity and time. That's just what I default to because I think about calendar as helping people manage their time. Tasks is a product that helps people manage all of their to-dos. And then she so beautifully reminded us to think a little bit bigger. And I had to write that down. It was so beautiful, Bianca. Thank you. Because really, what Workspace is all about is so much more than helping people manage their time and their tasks. And when you look at all of the products that are involved in Google Workspace, it's really about helping people connect with one another. It's about helping people manage their time, not just at work, but with their personal lives as well. And with the pandemic, those habits changed drastically, as everybody has talked about. So meetings, there's been a ton of research around meetings and how those skyrocketed. And then there was this overwhelm, this Zoom overload, right? So all of a sudden, we're on these platforms all the time. We're exhausted. How do you set those boundaries? Calendar is one of the main platforms where people relied on setting their boundaries, on saying no, on saying this is my personal time with my family, this is my work time, this is when you can meet with me. So all of a sudden, we had these products that were responsible for something that's pretty heavy. I mean, people's mental health was being affected during all of this. So this was a really big responsibility for us. It wasn't just about helping people say, okay, here's when I'm available for meetings anymore. It was about, this is my family life, this is my personal life, and these are my boundaries. So if you had asked me yesterday, my answer would have been much different, so thank you. That's the point of these conferences. And I spent the last year actually breaking down the silos that I was just talking about. So I think it's really easy when you work in a business like mine. I work with a lot of different people. I work with a lot of different products, as you can see up there. So it's really easy to default to saying, I work on calendar and tasks. I need to move quickly. We have lots of product managers and engineers asking, hey, can you run a really quick study? Can you just do like a mini study? And so I think we just kind of default to doing those really rapid studies, those really siloed approaches, because it helps us recruit more quickly, it helps us run the study. Doing analysis on a huge foundational project, we probably all know is a lot more difficult and takes a lot more time than rapid research. So we scope down those questions just to really quickly address our product area. And so it's very easy to get down that rabbit hole of, I'm just going to focus on my product. And I think the challenge with that is you lose a lot of those really rich insights of how people, maybe even some of you, actually use these products. They're coming in and out of all of these products on a daily basis. They're not just going into calendar. That's not the first thing everybody does in the morning. I do. I work on the product. I have to. But that's not everybody's experience. And so what do you do in that situation? How do you get out of that mindset? Especially as a researcher in the organization, a big part of our responsibility is reminding our stakeholders and working with our stakeholders how beautiful people's experiences are and that it's not just about one product. And so I spent the last year actually building this research program. Very happy to talk about timelines because I think you can do it more quickly. But I spent the last year building a research program to break down these silos and to expose our users, our stakeholders, to our users' experiences in and out of all of these products, not just that individualized experience. But unlike most methodologies, there's just no playbook out there for a research program. If you try and look up, how do I run a research program, there's just not much. So I've run a lot of different types of research programs, and from this I've learned what works really well and a lot of failures. There's a ton of ways that it can go wrong. And I was really surprised when I was running my own program because I had experience working with so many different people to help run their programs. So I thought, yeah, running my own program, no problem. But then I came to running my own and I realized just how many pitfalls there are. And of course, like any methodology, there's things about running interviews that you don't necessarily learn from the textbooks or school. So any methodology can be this way, but there's not even a textbook to tell you how to get started on a program. So I'll talk a little bit about what a program is, or at least how I've defined it, compared to a one-off study, a step-by-step guide on how I did it, and of course, the learnings, what goes well, what doesn't go well. So first, what it is. Compared to a one-off study, so when I talk about a one-off ad hoc study, I'm talking about having that research question like, how are small business owners using calendar and tasks to organize their time and all of the to-dos that they have? So maybe we want to learn more about this. We want to see how they're using our products today. I might set up something that looks like this. This might be an oversimplification, but it's actually very true. So we do a lot of rapid studies like this. Study, recruit, run the study, do the analysis, and share it out, and then you move on. So let's say that while I have this question about how small business owners organize their time and their to-dos, maybe a couple of other researchers have very similar questions. So maybe they want to know, how do people use Gmail and chat, and especially Meet, which obviously took off during the pandemic? How are people using these tools to communicate? How is that evolving? How is that changing? Let's see how people are actually using these tools. So what might you do in this situation? I think it's pretty common, for us at least, to do these separate siloed approaches for the reasons I talked about. You can just move very quickly. Maybe you're embedded in these product teams that focus on different experiences, so you just need to answer questions and move on. So even if you're the researcher across many of these different products, you might break it down because it does make that scope a lot easier to manage, the analysis, the reporting, et cetera. Or you just might be two separate researchers. In this case, I have partner researchers on all these different products, so they're focusing on those experiences. And if we have similar questions, maybe I'm running my study in January, they're running theirs in March, and you're just moving so quickly, sometimes it's really hard to actually connect the dots and to think about, okay, I just ran the study in January, I see they're running a similar study, I probably need to connect with them. Like, a lot of our insights are probably the same. That can be really hard to do in an organization when you're moving so fast. And at the same time, we had a ton of stakeholders, not just UX, but engineering and product and many other stakeholders who were also really interested in learning about and seeing how people are using our products today. So we thought, okay, so now there's actually interest and a business need, and we're seeing all of these different teams have very similar questions. So instead of taking a siloed approach, I actually worked with our UX leadership to pilot this new program, where I would actually work with these other teams to identify the topics. So what are the questions that are very similar? What do you want to see your users doing? And I worked with a vendor, a client, to kick off and kind of templatize the method as well as the deliverables. And so I could basically take their topic, run it through the program, take the bulk of the research work off of them, because they also have so many other questions they're trying to answer. Especially Meet during the pandemic, they were so busy. So if they have similar questions and we have a way to answer those questions, let's run it through the program. And Fenny, you had a really great quote yesterday. You said, sometimes it's hard to land research when it doesn't connect to the bigger picture. And I thought that was such a great quote because it definitely was the heart and soul of this program, was really trying to connect these insights to a bigger picture. So it's not just about taking that workload off of the researchers. It's actually connecting it to a bigger purpose. So our stakeholders were really interested in seeing how people use these products. So how can we create a program around it and make it a little bit easier for everybody? And Chris also had a really good quote yesterday. He really passionately advocated for, I think that you need to make sure that you identify the research questions before the methodology comes. Whew. That was so beautiful because, again, I have so many stakeholders saying, can we just need a usability study? What's that thing you were talking about, diary? That was interesting. Can we do that? Okay, I'm glad you're laughing because it's not just me. And so I think I'm a very passionate advocate as well for Well, what do you want to learn? What are your questions? Usability sounds great. I would love to run that with you. And then you just change the methodology because you want to do something that works really well to answer the research question. So this program wasn't about taking topics and trying fitting them into the program. It worked so well because we had so many teams that had this question, and this program, the methodology, worked really well to answer these questions. And there were 3 main advantages compared to a one-off ad hoc study. So the first pulled a bunch of insights from the State of User Research report that User Interviews does for 2022, really interesting report about our field. They found that about 1/5 of researchers have executive-level stakeholders. And the researchers that do have executive-level stakeholders are happier with how research is used to make decisions. And I found this to be so true with the program. So the other thing with a program is it's a brand. And if you're anywhere in the world and you walk into a Starbucks, what do you know? You know what to order, and you can kind of guess what you're going to get. It's pretty standardized. So that's just one power of brands, is they set expectations for what you're going to get. So creating a brand around the program, stakeholders knew what to expect. They knew what they were getting. So when they heard another episode is what we called them, it was kind of a series of studies. So episode 1, episode 2. When episode 2 was coming around, they're like, oh, I've heard of this program. Okay, I know what to get. I know what the report's going to look like. What are the insights? I know what the research is. So rather than having to explain the methodology all over again, like ad hoc studies, it's all kind of built into the brand. So I thought it was much easier to actually bring the insights to that executive level compared to ad hoc studies. Career growth, this one's really close to my heart. Again, from the User Interviews research, they found that 60% of researchers have over 5 years of experience. And I think a very common way for us to grow in our career, we talked a lot about the T-shaped person, we can learn new methodologies, which is great, or we can kind of go deeper and try and improve the methodologies that we already know. So I found this program to be a really great way. I wasn't doing a new methodology, I was actually just going deeper and trying to apply a methodology that I already knew in a very different way, which was a lot of fun. And the last one is research ops. So as research teams are growing, they're actually predicting research ops to grow as well. So as teams get bigger, you often find this role more and more in organizations that are growing. And they found that researchers with research ops support were actually happier in their job roles, which I definitely find to be true. They take a lot of logistics off of our plate, and they have an expertise that we don't always have. So it's a really good marriage between the disciplines. And a program is a really great way to work with a research ops team because it's all about building that brand, doing a series of studies. It's not just that short-term commitment. So they can really help scale the insights across the organization. Okay, step by step. So I won't call on you, but just show of hands, has anybody done this kind of approach, like a research program? A little bit, okay. Yeah, you guys talked about that program earlier. Exactly, so that's a very different style of program. I'll show a little bit about what my program is, but I won't go into too many details here. Please feel free to ask questions about this, though. I could talk all day about this. So when it comes to building a research program, there's 2 main phases. So it's about establishing the program, and then you're also driving all the research that's part of the program. When it comes to establishing the program, there's these 3 main aspects to it. So you're defining it, you're promoting it, and you're maturing the program. Now, that's a lot to take on if it's something new. So I would say if you really wanted to focus on the most important aspects, these are the ones that stood out to me. That very beginning stage of defining the program, the objective, making sure that you're aligned with your business stakeholders. So in our case, right, our product, our engineering team, they were very interested in seeing how people use the product. So that was part of our business objective, was to build that stakeholder empathy. That was something they were interested in. And then also establishing those metrics and consistently measuring that. Because you're building a series of topics, it's not just that one study, you're gonna learn a lot throughout the process, and you're gonna wanna make changes potentially, so you wanna make sure you're measuring that feedback. The biggest kind of pain points or learnings that I took away were these. Prioritizing the most impactful deliverables. So our objective was to really show what the user experience was like. And the partner that I was working with, the research director, she wanted to use this program as a new way to build interactive user journeys, which is not something that we've done before. We didn't have the expertise within our own team, so we partnered with this vendor as well because they had a design agency. And we spent a lot of time building this very cool interactive user journey where we had the videos from the user. It was showing like the highs and the lows of the experience. You could click into those high moments. They had quotes and everything, and you could watch the videos. And we loved it. We thought it was a lot of fun. But our stakeholders did not engage with slides that way. It has to be in presentation mode. Super small technical difference, but they just didn't engage with slides that way. So instead, we pivoted and we spent a lot of energy building videos because they did really like the videos, as we've all talked about in this conference. So I'll talk a little bit about what we did instead in the very end. And then just making it easy for people to find it later, and the project management, it was a lot to take on. So I underestimated just how much project management it would be, including working with our client team, as well as all of these other teams that you're partnering with. So there's just a lot of communication going back and forth, a lot of different phases in the timeline. When it comes to driving the research, it's really not that different from ad hoc research. So you have the planning stage, you're running the sessions, and then of course you're sharing it out. But I would say some of the most important parts of a program, that very first one, so determining which team and topic to work with. And yesterday, PJ mentioned that you just have to align with the business cycles because it can be hard to land something. He said there's nothing that makes research more irrelevant than being too early or too late. And I was like, that's such a great summary because that's definitely what happened here. Because we had so many teams that had topics they were interested in, we had to really work with those teams on aligning and talking with them and saying, if we start your project in February and your deliverables are April, will that actually work for your team? It's a program. We couldn't do every topic right away, so we kind of had to plan further long term. And then engaging with the stakeholders during the sessions. I don't think there's really anything more I can say that all of you haven't already. I think a huge part of this program was actually bringing stakeholders into the room, having them watch the studies, because a lot of their feedback, a lot of the insights, those are the aha moments. And so by the time that we put those video highlights together, they had seen some of them, but then they saw all the story come together, and they're like, oh, I saw some of those sessions. Yeah, okay, that was true for other people. That's really cool to see. But the pain points, so determining the main research partner, because you're not the researcher for the other team, you might not have domain expertise. You might not know those stakeholders. So having a partner on that team, and if it's not a researcher, that's actually okay. It can be a product or engineering partner. Somebody that knows the space really well, because you need to make sure that you're prioritizing those questions really well. You need to make sure that you're incorporating all the right questions into the discussion guide. You don't have that expertise. You may not know the product very well, actually. So making sure that you have a partner to do that. And then creating really engaging share-outs. So I learned after the first episode that because I'm handing over this research to the other team to own from that point on, so you want to take a step back, you can't present that research every day thereafter. I had researchers pinging me and saying, hey, we have all of these really amazing forums where I want to share the findings, but I just need a smaller deck, or I just need like a smaller highlight reel. So knowing that up front, we were able, after the first episode, to work with our vendor and build that into the program so that, again, that was something I didn't necessarily have to do. Okay, last couple of things. If you're going to run a research program, there's 3 things I thought would be most important to think about. MVP in this case is not your minimal viable product, it's your most valuable partner. So in my case, this was our UX research director. She was a huge advocate. In the very beginning, she was an advocate for the program, and she was the one that tried to really help shape those deliverables. So she was one of the first people to realize that this very cool interactive user journey that we were excited about just wasn't working. And so she was very open to shifting the deliverables. And she was also in email threads, in chat rooms, in meetings, in these forums that I'm just not in. So when it comes to sharing those insights, she was my main partner in sharing these snippets and actually bringing our VPs into the decks because they had seen the videos and they're like, I want to learn more, where can I do that? And then she would respond and engage them and loop me into all of that. Focusing your energy, like I said, we spent a ton of time on this awesome user journey, which I'm still really proud of. We talk about it within our team. We show how cool it is, but it's been actually really helpful to circulate within our company as like, this isn't like the best approach. Stakeholders just don't engage with it this way, so maybe don't take this approach. So we learned a lot, but we also spent a lot of energy on it. So instead, making sure that you understand your stakeholders, what they need, what's going to have the most impact, and actually spending your energy on those deliverables. Oh, and then teammates. So this is also, for us, this was our vendor. Our client was so important to this. We ended up picking a vendor who had expertise with video editing as well as design, because we knew we had agreed up front that we wanted to do maybe 3-4 episodes, but we just kind of pay per episode, because we weren't sure if this was really going to work out. We weren't sure how much we need to change it. And because we thought there might be so many changes, we needed to make sure that we had a vendor that had that expertise. So we picked somebody with a design department as well and video editing. And then the other teammate is a program manager. So for my program, we did not have a program manager. For other programs I've helped run, we have. And I've just seen a big difference in having a program manager who can help scale those insights. All right, last one, I promise. Seeing some tired eyes. So I would say, like any other methodology, there's always pros and cons. But when it comes to choosing between a program versus this one-off study approach, these 3 pros are what I would focus on. So if you have that organizational alignment, that business need, and you're seeing, hey, there's a lot of different teams that this could work with, we have stakeholders who are interested in something like this aligns with our business goal. If you have a researcher who's looking for an opportunity like this, like I said, I had a ton of fun. There were a lot of failures, there were a lot of challenges, but there were also a lot of successes. And it was just a really fun, creative project for me. And if you have the organizational resources. So of course, we were lucky enough to find a really great vendor that we could work with. And we also had access to program managers. So we ended up ending the program after 1 year because it just worked out really well to have it for that year. Programs don't always need to go on forever, and sometimes it's actually inefficient and doesn't align with business goals after a year. So we ended the program, but if we had continued, we talked about definitely bringing a program manager in. And then our marketing team also tries to highlight some researchers, some stories around, how do we do the research behind our launches. This is my good friend Carol-Ann on the Meet team. So if you're interested in hearing more stories like this, not just at conferences, but how we do research at Google, you can always go to our blog. But otherwise, really hope some of you have questions. If not, I won't take it personally. It is almost end of the day. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your attention.
Thank you so much. We already have the first question here.
Oh, too many microphones. Yeah, hi, Ioli Gameloft. I wanted to ask you, obviously there are different teams, and the different teams you collaborate have different objectives, right? So how do you prioritize which ones to deal with first? Were there certain ones that you did not deal with at all because they were interesting only for them, but not for other teams? And yeah, how did you manage that?
Really good question. So 2 things I would say were really important in that. One is building a pipeline from the very beginning. So doing a lot of promotion. So I was going around to a lot of the different teams saying, hey, I'm kicking off this new research program. If you have a topic that you think is really interesting, would fit well, let me know. And I even had a forum and a place that they could schedule calls with me. So I would talk with a lot of different teams. The second research partner. So my research director, of course, has visibility into high-level business objectives, et cetera, that I may not. So she was really, really important in helping me make that decision between the different topics, because she also knew, okay, this will probably change in the next few months and become irrelevant. So we need to do quicker research there. So we talked with that team about doing that instead. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for that. Rachel from 2CV. To what extent, skill-wise, for you managing that program, do you think it was about UX research skills versus project management skills? What's the ideal balance of those 2?
Great question. I think having, of course, a very strong understanding of the research skills is critical, 70-30 probably for research versus ops, because the heart and soul of the program is built around that methodology. And so if from the very start you're defining the wrong methodology, it's not going to go well. And I think also being a really strong voice with your agency is really important. So they don't, they can help build the methodology for sure, and they can even propose, hey, within our agency we have these different expertise. So they had proposed a quant aspect, for example. So if I did not have a strong expertise in research, I might have gone for that because it sounds sounds really hot, sounds really exciting, but maybe it's not the best for answering the question. And then the ops part, I would say, is 30% because even if you had no project management skills or you just doesn't excite you, I love project management, but if it didn't excite you and this is not a skill set you have, the program would be fine. I mean, in the end, the comms are not so much different than just managing your email and having a timeline and a Gantt chart with the vendor.
Hi, Patricia King, Dig Insights. So you talked earlier about, looking at the objectives first and developing the methodology second. And it's funny because when I do a capabilities, that's how I actually start. Because I'm like, we have all of these different methodologies. What do we need to use? And I'd love to hear your kind of experience on this internally, because I often find that all of the end clients here, people that know research, people that come out and come to these conferences, they actually usually give you the space to do that. They're like, you're absolutely right, this is the best methodology. But it's actually usually kind of end clients without as much research experience that they're like, well, I want a focus group for this, or I want to do an ethnography. And I'm like, well, it's brand positioning. Maybe we should test this concept in a focus group. And I find sometimes, it's figuring out the right methodology is kind of the difficult part if you want to get to the right answers. And I feel like, working internal at Google, you probably may face that even more depending upon the team if they have their own perceptions. So yeah, just wondering if you came across that and how you dealt with it.
Absolutely. Come across this all the time. Which is amazing because part of that is if I have a product manager or engineer coming to me and saying, I want to do a usability study, that's like best case exciting. That means they want to work with research. So I love that. And I think that's a great opportunity to then talk with them. So you want to be their partner. I think I've learned my lesson in being like, that's crazy, why would we do that? You don't want to be a barrier. You don't want to be seen as the barrier. They're your partner. You guys both have the same goal in the end, right? So I think the best approach I've learned is show them what the outcome could look like. So especially with Conjoint and MaxDiff, for example, I was working with the marketing team, and they're proposing this new project. And I'm sitting there going, oh, MaxDiff, 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 please say MaxDiff. And so I just kind of probed, like, oh, what are you trying to learn? Just to make sure I really understood. And so I asked them, what methodology do you think you're going to use with this? And they said, actually, we're not sure. We're going to pass this along to our insights team, and they're going to turn them into methodology. And I was like, yes. So I think that's when I said, oh, can I show you something? So I pulled up the MaxDiff, an example of what we've done in the past. And I was like, is this kind of what you're looking to do? And the lights just went on. They got so excited because they could see what the outcome is. So you can't always explain research to them. I mean, it's not their job, it's your expertise. So I think if you can show them what it looks like, and they're like, yes, that's what I want, especially product managers. I love showing product managers, like, here's what this research looks like, here's what a diary looks like. And I think that's where they start learning too, like, oh, I remember that diary thing you did, like, can we do that? Because they don't know, like, oh, that actually won't answer that question. So showing them that visual is a really good way to negotiate with them.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Very interesting talk. I wonder if you've run to the situation in which, because you're kind of iterating on a method, if the product teams kind of go down on energy because they are kind of reusing the same method over and over again, and if you have faced that challenge, what strategies do you have to keep the energy high?
If you haven't noticed, I have a lot of energy, and I think that actually really helps. It's kind of a joke in the Switzerland office. I'm like the American that like bobs around when we were in the office, which at first I honestly wasn't sure if that would be too much or if that's like a cultural difference that's going to be a barrier for me. But fortunately, I learned that that's just a strength that works well. And so I think just being excited yourself and showing the passion that you have, I think especially during the pandemic, everybody was exhausted. Everybody's overwhelmed. Everybody's tired. Nobody wants to read these long reports, right? So I think the energy was actually really low during all of this. And I think just coming into those meetings and being kind of the sunshine bringing the questions, making sure people feel heard. I think that was the most important thing for bringing people's energy up, because if you were talking over them or they just didn't care so much about the research, you could instantly see that, right? We're trained to kind of read people. So using that strength in meetings, and if you see the energy is low, just asking them, like, are you not interested in this? We don't have to do this. And that kind of goes, no, wait, we want this. So I think just being really, really honest about what is it that you want, right? Is this not working for you? Why is that? And just there were lots of meetings like that, especially with product, so talking with them and making sure they were really concerned about the timeline and everything working up really well, or lining up really well. And I think that was a really frustrating point for them, where they were just like, oh, this is not going to be relevant for me soon. So talking with them, being like, okay, well, if we need to move quicker, let's talk about what we can do. And they're like, oh, we can do something differently? So just help them see that there's solutions, right? And this doesn't always have to be it. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I'm not going to try and force it on them.
Thank you so much. Obviously, you started a great discussion.
I love it. Thank you for all the questions. Really loved it.
Great. Thank you, Shannon.